Hello everyone, this is Christy from MyScrapbookEvolution.com, and it's time to take a look at Prompt 8 of the Stencilfied Journal project. Just to recap, if you're looking for prompts 1 through 7, you can find those on the My Scrapbook Evolution blog or on my YouTube channel. This project, the Stencilfied Journal project, is hosted by Tina Walker, who is a columnist for Stencil Girl. I am not paid or compensated by Stencil Girl in any way to participate. I'm just doing this for fun. So without further ado, let's get to prompt 8, which is a challenge to stencil with glue. Now I'm working once again in my recycled art catalog that is now an art journal. I am using a page that I had already started on. I kind of just stamped off some of the other stencils that I had been working with before. So you're seeing 3 stencils in play today. The first is that background. It's that purple pink color, the Art Deco borders. I had excess paint from another page and I just kind of wiped it off and stamped that stencil onto this page to give it a start. The second you're seeing is the one I'm using the glue with. That's the Circular Patterns for Play stencil, and I'm just using that white school glue kind of like a pin to fill it in. The third stencil is the Rose Window and Border stencil. It's on that black paper with the white. If you'll recall, there was a previous journal prompt which called for us to stencil on a journal page, rip it up, and add it back. Well, I didn't use all the pieces, so I chose to include those here. Now the hardest part about stenciling with the glue was waiting for it to dry, because you're using that school glue very thickly. You want a thick layer to get that raised edge. Drawing with it left a sort of uneven mark in the stencil line. It was kind of fun to use. It is acting as a resist. As you see, I'm sort of wiping away the acrylic paint with a baby wipe and spreading it over the page. You're noticing that parts of that stencil design are starting to show up. It catches the paint in the creases, which is wonderful. It begins adding another layer to the journal page. As I wipe the paint away, you can see a little bit of the layer underneath, while at the same time getting that texture from the glued element on the stencil. So one quick thing to note is that because it is a water-based glue, it may begin to activate when you add the paint and you wet it. So just keep that in mind. If it starts to get too gummy, just pause, wait a little bit for it to dry, and then come back in and finish your work. I decided to add another layer of the glue with a slightly different design, and in the beginning I was coloring it in using that glue like a pen in the same way that I did before. I wanted to see if I could get things to be a little more even, because when you're adding it as though you're using it like a pin, it comes out slowly, the layer's a bit uneven and rough. So here I just take the lid off, I put a little on my finger, and I start spreading it around the page. Another thing that you want to take into consideration when you're using this glue, if you use any glue at all, you don't want to damage your stencil. So immediately after you complete this step, set your journal aside in a safe spot to dry, and then go wash your stencil off. Personally, I don't often work with a lot of pastels, so I wasn't really happy with the colors that I have here. And I also wanted to bring in the black from those scrap pieces I had collaged in. So I've added a little bit of black gesso, and I'm wiping it away in a similar fashion to what I did with the blue acrylic paint earlier. I'm wanting it to really get into the creases of that glued stencil design, bring them up a little bit. And I'm wanting to just change the color of the layer a little bit so it's not so soft, and I don't know, I'm not really liking pastels a whole lot. Making these layers is sort of a back and forth process of where you add and you take away and you add again. And this is just one part of that layering process. So now I kind of decided the black was a little bit much and I want to bring in some lighter color. I want to be able to put some designs on top of the black, and in order to see it, I felt I needed a little bit of white. So, and here's Pixie investigating what I'm doing. I've taken white gesso and I'm just scraping it onto the page using a palette knife. I was kind of hoping that the palette knife would sort of just roughly hit over those raised edges from the glued portion of the stencil and show the design a little bit more. It didn't do it as much as I wanted, but it was a fun experiment. And I just sort of rubbed it in with my fingers. I added in a little bit of ink, and I am using, once again, the palette knife. Now here, I got some great effects because the palette knife pushed the ink into some of the crevices and allowed it to pool in those areas and dry a little bit deeper. I've used just a couple of colors, limiting my palette choices to ensure that I don't go overboard with color. Once I finished and let everything dry, I came back in with this gold ink and tried not to get too much help from Pixie, and I just added in a few more drops, just trying to draw the design over. And I kind of just started tilting the journal and letting the design form itself, letting the ink go where it wanted to go, and I'll see what the end result is going to be when I'm ready to draw in my design. So here's a couple of close-ups of the page before I started drawing on it. You can see that there's a lot of texture and that some of the color has sat inside those crevices formed by the glue. The design itself isn't crisp and clear, but it does have this wonderful outline that creates a lot of visual interest for my art journal page. The final step for me was to draw something onto the page. And I've wanted to make this art journal page all about portraits or people. I kind of could see a little bit of an outline here of a person in the ink design that had been created. Now that person isn't in proportion, so this definitely ended up being a little bit more of an abstract sort of art journal page. And it just gave me an idea where I would add in one sort of silhouette of a person here, and then I would add it into the other side of my art journal page as well. I'm working with Inktense pens, or pencils I should say, which means that once I draw in my design, I can activate them with a little bit of water and kind of spread a little bit. Some lines will be hard, while others I'll be able to pull some of that color into different parts of the design and add a little bit of shading. And here is a closer look at the completed page. You can find more photos of this on the My Scrapbook Evolution website. Don't forget, you can play along with prompt 8 as well. Be sure to share a link to your project in the video comments or in the comments on my website. For more inspiration with the prompt, search for hashtag the Stencilfied Journal, and be sure to check out Tina Walker's blog post. She'll be sharing what she did with the prompt. You can find the link to that in the notes for this video.